All right, and welcome back, everyone, to Conquering Conversations, the podcast where we're cultivating the next generation of conquerors. And most undoubtedly, that future generation of conquerors is going to be heavily involved with artificial intelligence. There's really, at this point, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is here, it is here to stay. So we're, as a school, at Desert Christian Academy, we're really wrapping our minds around what AI means in modern educational landscapes. And so we also want to equip you as parents and community members, just what's going on with AI education, AI in general. As I know, it's just a big topic in everybody's mind. And so we've been getting some help from the Social Institute. They've they have a ton of great resources, not just AI, but the digital world as a whole. And we have an incredible guest to have this conversation, Alli Lipsher of the Social Institute. Thank you for taking time to join this episode.
Of course, no, thank you for having me. I mean, this is the kind of thing we talk about amongst ourselves every day, so we always appreciate getting out and being able to talk about it with, yeah, some of our friends.
Great. Well, why don't you real quick just to orient everybody, um, what do you do? What's the Social Institute? What's its goals and aims, and how's it trying to make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, our mission statement really is that we support students and their role models, that's families, that's educators, in navigating their worlds in healthy and high character ways. I mean, we know that especially now that tends to be supporting students and families and role model and their, families and educators in and around a lot of the issues that, you're talking about around technology, around AI, and kind of the way that all those things have now woven themselves into the fabric of, students' everyday lives. So our work is really centered around just, supporting that. We are a company. We've been around for about 10 years now. We are an organization that is filled with former educators. I spent a long time working in higher education. We have a lot of people that have worked in education in all sort of aspects of it. So really kind of coming at it from this mission-driven place of supporting students and understanding what that looks like as well.
Well, incredible. Thank you. Thank you guys for what you're doing and the stuff that you're putting out. I know parents, the Social Institute wrote our AI pledge that we introduced with our students this year. We thought it was just a great document, a great way to really get more intentional as we talk to students about healthy uses of AI in the educational space. So just so you know, just to give them credit where credit is due there. Hopefully, if you're a parent a parent of a 6th through 12th grader, you saw that pledge at some point, or at least had a conversation about it. So just some of the steps that we're trying to take to really get ahead of this. But Allie, kind of let's start bigger picture.
Mhm.
Yourself, Social Institute, what are you guys seeing with the overall AI landscape and specifically education right now?
In education, yeah, we're this really interesting moment in time, right? I think for a long time we sort of had started to hear about AI, and it was just like to use a metaphor, it was this like magical lake at the top of a hill that we couldn't see. And then in 2023, when it was opened up to the public, like this dam broke. And we were just all of a sudden, a dam or Pandora's box or however you want to think about it, it was just here and it was among us and it was rapidly kind of working itself into our lives in ways that we could see and also ways that we couldn't see. And I think that for education specifically, like I said, we're in this really interesting moment in time where the dam is broken. Like we are on the banks, for again just to dial into that metaphor, and we are being surrounded by this water, by this new shifting reality, and it's shaping the landscape. And I think that what we're seeing, and we have conversations with schools and educators every day, what we're seeing is that there is a really wide range of reactions to that. Of course, every school is different. We're seeing in some cases, we have school leaders that are maybe building irrigation systems or building bridges and really kind of diving into the more like innovative side of AI, leaning on it as a tool or just more permissive or exploratory with it. And you have some, educators that are maybe like on the banks or further back saying, don't go near the water, this is dangerous, really unfamiliar with it. But I think that it's important to remember that AI has and is in our lives every day in some capacity. And that's, educationally, if you are a school that uses Google, that can be something as simple as, Google Gemini automatically, creating an AI result for your search. And of course, that's something you can remove if you want to, but it is being woven into our lives. Or if that's in our everyday lives and you're on Spotify and you're getting suggested artists or songs or whatever, all of that is AI. And I think the important thing to remember is maybe just recognizing where we are, getting a feel for how it's shaping the landscape, understanding that students are very often interacting with it, whether that is intentionally or unintentionally, like we said, kind of how it's woven into their lives. And then, I think our responsibility as people who are in charge of leading students is to have an understanding, to gain knowledge of the technology. And of course, how you decide to go about using it or allow its use or, using it as a tool wherever you are in that's certainly a personal decision. But I think that there is a responsibility to understand what it is, how it can be used, some of the upsides, certainly some of the downsides. And I think that's really where the Social Institute spends our time, is just in that understanding piece. And the education piece is trying to share just very sort of, agnostically, not good, not bad, but like, what is this and how can it be used and how maybe should it be used?
Yes, and one thing, like just as a administrator, to me in my career of 25 plus years or whatever, the the other similar moment was just really the proliferation of the internet,
Mhm.
and its impact on the classroom. Like I remember just constant conversations with like history teachers specifically trying to get, to just wrestle with the idea of rote memorization of historical facts. Like, does that have a place in education? Is that should that be the primary focus of a history lesson when for the rest of time, pretty much, we will have any fact we want within seconds of a quick search? And I remember, like traditional history teachers just struggling with that. And so now seeing that now in the AI space, as far as
Mhm.
like, so now not only do you have the access of all information pretty much in the world, but now you have an intelligence that will use that information for you, that can articulate, summarize, synthesize quicker and better than probably the human brain can,
Right.
to a certain degree. And now trying to get educators to kind of think through, okay, so now what are the skills? And it just, I don't know, just in my career, those are kind of the two, kind of similar moments that I can think of, that it's just like things are going to have to somehow are going to have to be different.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's a great kind of comparison because that really is the only other time where things kind of expanded as quickly as they did. And I think you also bring up a really good point where the questions, right, are like, well, is this something that we should accept and adapt to? And I think that's where that sort of knowledge of the technology is so important. And I'm not saying that, every educator should be an AI expert, but it's so important for educators and leaders to understand what it is and understand that, like, yes, it has this ability to learn, but it's learning from the information that we're giving it. And that, comes with bias, that comes with error, that comes with all of these things that humans are, like giving to this machine learning, and it is advanced in many ways and it works in many ways that our brains do not. But it's also so important to understand that because even, with the understanding, like it would be so dangerous to just blatantly accept everything that AI gave you as truth. And there are so many things that you can do, to help students understand that. And it's a really important like skill for students to be able to understand. So I think that you're absolutely right. This is, like I said, a really unique moment in time, maybe only comparable to sort of the expansion of the internet, and it's different in many ways as well. But I also think it really highlights the need for just an understanding of a new technology, because like it or not, it is going to continue to be integrated into the way that we coexist with, our work, with each other, with all of these different things.
Yeah, so that's kind of on the educator side, just the administrator, teacher side, just how we're trying to like think through it. And I think you articulated great, just the spectrum, of responses. And when I think about it through my lens, I'm like, every point on that spectrum is useful in
Mhm.
certain situations. Like that there's moments where we're like going to be situations where we're going to be pushing our teachers to just straight traditional pen paper aspects of learning just to allow kids to develop their own personal
Mhm.
authentic intellect without the intrusion of artificial intelligence. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So there'll be moments where that absolutely needs to happen. But then on the other side, there's going to be it'd just be foolish to not teach kids how to utilize the innovative aspect and
Yeah.
weave that into their process. So anyways, that's just kind of just to share with our community just kind of where what this is really doing to us as educators. But
Mhm.
since so many people listening to this are going to be parents and trying to help, I know I've got four sons, trying to
Okay.
help my own kids through the AI scape.
Yeah.
You talk about higher education. Yes, it just hit my two oldest sons in the middle of their college careers,
Mhm.
where I don't think their professors were really ready for it. And you heard the stories where AI took Harvard classes and got B's. I mean, it just
Right.
so that
Right.
temptation was huge, for my older boys, and now it's trickling down into our high school, middle school as well.
Yeah.
But from a parent's perspective, how are you guys helping parents frame AI for their children as they're trying to come alongside their kids
Yeah.
and make sure they're developing their intellects as highly as possible, but at the same time, if there's a way to save some time, let's save some time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think again, like that understanding and just like a baseline understanding, like it's too tall of a task for anyone to become an expert in something as big as AI. But like having this basic understanding of what it is and what it isn't, and then doing a little bit of work just to stay on top of whether it's trends or whether it's just kind of, additional basic information about something like AI. I think is a great place to start for parents. Like inform yourselves, arm yourselves with, tools. I always use the metaphor of like having tools in your tool belt, and just having information about AI is such an important tool to have in your tool belt, because it can be a really intimidating space to have a conversation with your kids about, especially when your kids are more digitally native than you. And that goes for social media. That certainly goes for AI. That's, it's kind of a common truth when it comes to families helping their kids navigate this. But I think that, one thing that really comes to mind when in that idea of like understanding what it is and how it's being used is we came across, and I'm thinking about this recently because this is one of the conversations that we're having a lot. And we actually just came out with a lesson for students around this. Is this fact that I think it's like 72% of kids have used an AI companion. And that's not, hey, help me write a prompt for my paper. That's like, I need advice. So they're
Mm.
asking AI for advice. 72% of kids have reported this. And I think that, teaching really basic tools, skills to navigate these spaces, helping families and helping their students understand that, one of the single most important indicators of success is having a supportive adult in your life for students. So giving kids that knowledge and then helping them understand the difference between talking to, call it a trusted adult, and talking to AI is important, because they might not have that information, and they might lean on, this technology and use it in a way that it's really not prepared to be able to do, good and help. We know that schools are leaning, or excuse me, families, I should say, are leaning on schools to support these types of educations a lot. I think that we're looking at surveys constantly and kind of having conversations constantly. It was something like 65% of parents, I can't remember the exact survey, but I'll get it for you, agreed that schools should teach students how to use tech and AI responsibly. But that is often a two-way conversation because, like I said, some schools are on that, like I said, like the bank, and they're saying, don't go in the water, that's dangerous. We don't know what it is. But when students go home, they may be using, their phones or their personal devices to engage with AI. So it's important that the skills be kind of being had in conversations from both sides, so from families and from educators as well. And I think that understanding that AI is something that is maybe not something to be avoided. It is maybe harder to be avoided than it seems. I think families maybe sometimes don't realize how much AI is embedded into their students' everyday lives. But just that basic understanding is such an important tool for families to have in their tool belt. So, to answer your question, like framing it in a way that they can understand it and they can sort of approach it as, hey, this is my understanding of this. This is, I understand what it is. I understand how it's being used. Let's have a conversation about, let's huddle about some of the ways that we as a family want to use this. Let's have an understanding of ways that it shouldn't be used. Those kinds of conversations and framing start with, a knowledge, start with an understanding. And then they lean on this idea. We always just use this term of huddling, which is anytime you turn like a one-way conversation, like the do this, don't do this, into, a conversation where you're kind of giving and getting feedback and things like that. So being able to, for families, have a base understanding of it and then also huddle with your students and have really kind of productive conversations, I think is the best sort of way to approach something that is emerging and maybe can sometimes be challenging for families.
That's interesting. I did honestly, that's so I didn't even think about the companion really aspect of AI, and just as you're sharing, it makes so much sense. Just even the generational
Hmm.
divide that's going to come from thinking about AI, like as an almost 50-year-old adult, like I don't will never care to use AI as a companion. Like we're at that stage
Didn't
in
think about
life
it. Yeah.
where we're trying to have less conversations with people than more. You know what I mean? We're just at that
Yeah.
stage of life where we're socially kind of already oversaturated,
Yeah. We're
and we're
very,
trying to find our own just time away. Where kids completely different.
yeah.
They're not even close to as saturated as they want to be. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
even that, like, I wouldn't even think to sit down with my kids and, wow, have you guys considered using AI as a friend? And
Yeah.
because they probably have, because probably their friends are sharing, like, oh, hey, I was talking
Mhm.
to some bot and this is what it said and blah blah blah. I don't know that on the social side, that's very interesting. But
Yeah, and there's a fine line, right? I mean, we certainly know, like, hey, I get, for example, I coached soccer for a long time. I would get emails from parents all the time. And now when I think back to how I might, I would have, this was a long time ago, but I would have maybe grabbed my response, typed it into ChatGPT and been like, can you make this a little bit more friendly
yeah,
for me? Can you make this a little bit more approachable? And there's a line in there where that becomes like, hey, what's some advice, right? Like it's not that far away from some of the ways that I think AI is being used very commonly. So it's also kind of important to maybe have that for context as well.
that's great. Getting more kind of, selfishly, let me prop up my teachers at my school, especially my
Mm,
high school teachers
yeah.
that are trying to sort this out real time. And as the head of school, I'm overseeing disciplinary actions that involve AI and stuff. So um, to help support our teachers, where does AI in the educational space, and I know it's ever evolving, but as of right now, best practices and just
Mhm.
general advice to students, when is crossing that use from just healthy helps to cheating? Um,
Cheating. Yeah.
yeah, how are you guys finding a line to draw there that parents can be proactive, when they're watching their kids do homework?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that you brought parents into the mix too. I think when AI crosses into cheating really depends on what your policies are as a school, what lines you're drawing, and then how well you communicate those policies. I mean, there's examples of a student that, got into trouble for using Grammarly when that wasn't necessarily clearly outlined. And then that kind of raises a question like, oh, can I use this for, to maybe correct the way that I use seemingly, for students, like the way that I use spell check to correct my work. And this is correcting my grammar and giving me some suggestions. So I think that it's a great question because it really highlights the need for clear policies and well communicated policies. So I don't dodge your question. I think there's some really kind of common pitfalls and things that kind of clearly fall into, the cheating side of things. And so the pitfalls that we see students falling into that I think demonstrate cheating, things like plagiarizing, which is anytime you're claiming work that's not yours as your own. And that's even if you give, AI a prompt and it does something for you and you copy and paste that, like that's plagiarizing, even though the initial idea started with you. So anytime you're using, or using someone else's work or something else's work now without a source attached to it or claiming it as your own, that's, pretty clear. I think that also leads to students forgetting to fact check sources. I can ask, AI to write me a quick note on something and it can give me some facts. And it's important to remember that AI is always going to come across as very confident. That's how it's designed. And that can make us believe the things that it's telling us when it's like, I think like 30 something percent of the time, you're getting something that may not be accurate. So it's so important to fact check. And whether you're a school that's like absolutely no AI, or perhaps you're a school that's like you can use AI, but you need to cite your work, it's also important to empower kids, to give them those tools to be able to cite their work correctly. I think that, more common things like completing homework without critically thinking, that's, gray area because what is critically thinking? And that depends school to school. Students that are relying on AI versus asking teachers, we see that as a pretty common pitfall. And then also forgetting to apply their own critical thinking skills. A lot of the times that comes without, kind of goes back to the fact checking that I mentioned. And then this idea of using AI in good ways as a tool. So there's a couple of great ideas that we've seen. This came out of a university when they were first navigating this. You mentioned that one of your sons was in college, and this happened. This kind of rolled out while he was in college. There was a university that rolled out like very quickly this idea of a stoplight, where they just use this idea of a stoplight to kind of give students the ability to gauge how they could use AI within their work. So red is like absolutely no AI can be used. You can't use it as a prompt, start to finish. Yellow is like you can use this as a prompt to think about an idea, but all your work must be your own, or however you want to define that. And then green is like, yes, this is an activity, use it, explore it, and whatnot. So I think that really, that ability to clearly communicate and understand where your line is going to make it more clear to students, like what is cheating and what is not.
Yeah, and that's true. Just inside baseball here, parents, that we are working on those because that's what we're finding, really well-defined policies and um, the policies that were more geared for other digital means, internet and stuff, obviously we're finding just are falling short, when it comes to AI. And so we are developing those policies as we speak because really what it comes down to on our side, it's like the gray area and coaching and helping mentoring kids is great and helping try to find those lines. It's when you're going to attempt to assign a consequence. That's
Got to be clear.
that's where it's got to be super duper clear.
Yeah.
And so we're learning that the hard way and the easy way, as we go. But yeah, it's it is very situationally based, and we need to be having those conversations, in the mentorship role. But I'm just us as administrators, we're well aware that if we're going to assign a consequence, we have to make sure that we're really buttoned up, and we haven't been as buttoned up as we need to be. But again, we're 3 years into this thing, so
Right.
you
It's
know,
hard. And it's hard to draw like a really firm line right now because you're exploring it, right? And I think it's okay to also realize that like that line can change. And so however you end up writing that policy, writing it in a way that there's a feedback loop is something that we always recommend, like bringing students into the conversation, bringing parents into the conversation, getting feedback on it allows you to realize that maybe it was too far to the right, too far to the left, too far, whatever that might be, and kind of redraw it as you need to. And like you said, as this technology changes, because we are only 3 years in.
Yeah, so have grace on us, peeps, and I know you
Yeah.
guys are. I know you guys are. Our families are tremendous. Um, so this kind of like really what it comes down to, you know, you can misuse anything, right? It really comes down to our individual character is really the the heartbeat of what's going to empower a student, any of us, to get the best out of AI without getting the worst out of AI, because it's really a situation by situation, just internal decisions. So we've been trying to, ever since the internet, been working on digital character, digital citizenship. What are those character traits? What what are kind of some new digital character development that needs to happen in young people as AI is emerging that you
Yeah, I
guys are
think,
finding?
yeah, definitely. I think there is a new set of skills that students need to be equipped with earlier. And the metaphor, I like metaphors if you can't tell, that I think is really helpful for this is kind of thinking of, our own experience when it comes to driving. So I'm an older millennial. When I was learning to drive, I saw, my parents drive, I saw my family drive, and then I got my permit and I was driving with them, and then I got my license and I wasn't allowed home, or I had to be home by a certain time. And I had this very sort of like, natural progression when it came to like learning how to drive. And I think that what really differentiates my experience with, students today's experience is the fact that they are born in the car. So they don't know anything else. And they're given the key to the car often far too early. So understanding that before they have the keys to the car, before they have the device or the watch or whatever it is, they need to have a really basic set of skills. And that can be as young as, we know that like 10 years old is kind of when students start to get their first devices. And then you're seeing kind of skills needed around, what is the difference between being on a screen and being off a screen? And hey, let's talk about the fact that every time, we take the screen away from you, you have really big feelings around it. So really kind of building basic skills from younger ages and then understanding kind of what the most common or maybe what your personal and your students' experiences with technology and depending on where they are, giving them the skills to navigate that. So, if your students are at a place where, they don't have a cell phone and all their friends have a cell phone, giving them and all of the students in that, age range, the ability to understand what is the best way for us to communicate plans when our social worlds are now starting to shift into, a place that involves technology and what does that mean for these different friendships versus, maybe seventh grade, because I'm thinking of one of the lessons that we have, like when social worlds have started to shift online a little bit more, maybe educationally, they have email accounts from school and they're starting to talk to each other in online spaces. What is the difference between talking and texting? Did you know that 95 what plus percent of the communication that we give to each other is nonverbal? So let's think about what that means when it comes to texting. So really, I think equipping students with skills that allow them to navigate the reality in the world that they're living in is such a critical piece of education. And that's education at schools, that's education at home, that's education everywhere. Yeah.
That's great. And just a little social institute plug. I do get your guys' weekly huddles and but what I do love is every conversation, every topic in the blog, so to speak, is has a lesson attached to it.
Mm,
Do you want to highlight some of those lessons that you guys have found? Like you said, as early as out, like we're a preschool through 12. So
mhm.
yes, we definitely want to be building this foundation at the earlier elementary grades as much as possible. Do you have any, lessons that kind of go to that you constantly refer people to help build these skills?
Yeah, I'm thinking of some of our most popular lessons. I think, we've got a great lesson for our third through fifth graders, kind of about the idea of like, we call it like helpers versus watchers. And at that age, we just use the example of like when a joke crosses a line, and what does that mean? Because, so often humor is such a great way to connect. And when we're young and when we're, third through fifth grade, kind of the elementary school, we're using humor as a way to try to connect with our friends. And oftentimes, we inevitably in our exploration maybe cross a line. And whether we're the person that crosses the line, whether we're the person that's at the expense of that, or whether we're just kind of in that circle or bystanders, there is a set of skills there that's going to be really important to be able to navigate when those conversations maybe shift into a group chat. And so we have actually that same lesson for sixth through eighth graders from a group chat perspective. When someone says something in a group chat that crosses a line, how do we react? And that's another set of skills, right? And then you take that into, the high school level, that's another set of skills. And I think that, you might kind of asked like what some of our more popular lessons were. And when it comes to building some of those foundational skills, I think that's a great example of one that, really starts with some of our youngest learners and ways that they're actually experiencing this very kind of common occurrence of like exploration and maybe crossing a line intentionally, unintentionally, whatever it might be. And then having skills, if you're the bystander, to be able to say, "Ooh, I don't know if I like that." Or, hey, let's maybe change the subject, or understanding that, in a group chat, maybe throwing an emoji in to deflect attention, and then having a side conversation. Hey, I didn't think that was that cool. Whatever the skills might be, whatever the situation might call for. It's like I said, I think that's a great example of maybe a specific point that it's really important to kind of build skills around with students.
Yeah, and that's very just as a administrator, like I can't tell you how many times a whole group of kids is is brought into the disciplinary office because of a group chat gone bad. And it's tough sometimes for the students and the parents. The bystanders are brought in too, not necessarily to intentionally get them in trouble, but they were there, they were involved, so they have a piece of the puzzle that we're trying to understand as we're trying to educate this situation. Yeah, that's such a that's but having that skill set earlier, before, because our kids just find themselves and they oftentimes are just like, why am I here? I didn't say the inappropriate thing,
Right.
so why? But it's like, well, you gotta understand the dynamics of digital group chats and things of that nature. So no, that's a definitely worthy lesson to start engaging in, and yeah, it's gonna help all of us. Are there any other like you've shared a lot of like intentional huddles, conversations, parent to students? Is there any other like really practical kind of things, conversations that you guys are advising parents and even teachers, mentors to have?
Yeah, yeah. I think that it's important to kind of start from this idea of like questioning, right? And I think that's where a lot of our recommendations come from, is just like having this idea of getting a base understanding of something. So I think when it comes to families, it's really important for them to kind of start from a place. Like when they think about the conversations that they're going to have with their kids around AI, like starting with questions is always a great place to start. And that's basic questions like what kind of thinkers do we want to raise? What does it mean to use that example again? Like, excuse me, what does it mean to use AI as a helper versus a shortcut? Like if I decide that I want this to be a tool for my kid to use because I know that their worlds are going to involve it. It's going to be involved in their worlds. Let's think about what it means to use AI as a tool versus a shortcut. Maybe that's the conversation I'm going to have. And things, you're as a family, as a parent, you're having conversations about values. You're having conversations about honesty and integrity and things like that with your students. So having conversations and starting with the question of like, what does it mean to be honest and have integrity in the age of AI? I think those are really great places to start having those conversations because they're going to look different for every family, for every household. And then using those answers to guide some of the ways that you want your student to be interacting with AI. And we know it's so, so important to tie those two, to tie conversations together. And when I say conversations, I mean the conversations that schools are having with students hey, here's our policy, here's how AI is going to be used, how it's not going to be used. Here's, a lesson that goes into what it is and what it isn't. And then understanding that bringing families into that conversation, again, with those really clear, kind of easy to communicate policies, guidelines, whatever they are for you, is going to help families guide that conversation as well, and also answer some of those questions as well, because they're able to kind of take the things that you're having conversations with about at school. You're able to provide them some information about those conversations, and then they're able to kind of use that to help and guide their own conversation. So again, it's so much more effective, we've seen, when you aren't just having those conversations like in a silo in one place. So really kind of bringing everyone into the conversation like you're doing here with this podcast, which is awesome. It is an awesome starting point.
We're trying. And one thing is, as you share, like when you shared the driving analogy, that I think it's important for us as adults to understand, like ChatGPT was launched in 2023, so people like you and me, we had a whole educational process of developing I use the term authentic intelligence versus artificial intelligence, because as an educator, I'm majoring in the authenticity of intelligence. That's my job. That's what people pay us for. Um, so we had this whole, like, for me, 45 plus years of developing an authentic intelligence free of even the temptation of artificiality. So now, as an adult, man, I'm all in on AI. It's
Yeah.
saving me so much time and saving me so much money, and so, like, so many. And I'm finding like us adults are like geeking out on this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we see that, and we see opportunities for our kids to have the same experience and
Right.
save time and be more efficient and all these things. And so there's a lot of us parents that are eager to get our kids, like, engaged, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind that where are they at in their authentic intelligence
Mhm.
journey? And that's the big caution, I share with parents that are just so geeked out and excited. We have a benefit that a kindergartner today just will not have. And so we have to put so much more intention into dividing that line between what's authentic and guarding that, developing that versus what's artificial.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if you have any, thoughts on that little rant, but
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think it really highlights the need, kind of this like overhead work that we're doing right now of catching up to understanding what AI is so we can effectively manage the development of that, authentic, intelligent with our students. And I think, that comes from learning alongside them in a way. We talk about giving them skills. If we don't have that skills, it's really hard to pass them on. So, I mean, even the basics of doing some of that learning with them is a great, I think it's an Encyclopedia Britannica website that has this really simple challenge of like identifying a real image versus an AI generated image. And they put the two
mm,
images side by side. I'm sure you've seen something like this. But like understanding what does it mean to do something as simple as recognize an AI generated image. And then, once you can do that, you're able to have a better conversation with your student about why this might be dangerous. As an example, we saw images of, a little over a year ago now when the wildfires in LA broke out, we saw images of the Hollywood sign on fire. That was an AI generated image that was circulating pretty widely. So having the skills to be able to identify quickly, right, that is an AI generated image will prevent people from spreading misinformation. So that's an important skill. So yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that it perhaps, I hope that highlights like the need for families to kind of take on this idea and educators to take on this idea of like doing the work, the overhead, to be able to be in a place where they can understand, we already have this understanding of authentic intelligence versus artificial intelligence, but now we need to teach that to our students. So we have to have a little bit of an understanding of AI to be able to do that and differentiate it for them. Because like we said, they're born in the car. It's really hard for them to understand kind of the difference between, what's inside the car, what's outside the car now.
hmm No, that's great. So I know it's hard, like with technology, and this is like, whoever can do this is going to make billions of dollars,
Yeah.
whoever has the crystal ball and can predict everything that AI is going to change. But just in our 3+ years, and you guys have dedicated so much of your time to this, as of today, a school 10 years from now, what are the key differences that you guys are seeing? It's just probably going to be unavoidable within the AI world that education will have to adapt and change. Like I shared with the history
Yeah.
teacher, like the goal of your lesson has to be something different than just memorizing facts in the Google world. How
Yeah.
how do you see it? Because I'm really wrestling with that, just as the one who's trying to set the vision for our school. But what are you guys seeing, and what do you feel you're able to predict?
Yeah, I think that's a great example that you gave with your history teacher, because there is a shifting reality, but I think it also highlights the need for skills that have been around, since, the beginning of education and of time. And I think, to use your example, like, while it might not be as important for students to be able to memorize an entire set of facts and dates throughout, a war, for example, to use a history
Hmm.
example,
Hmm.
it is going to be important for them to be able to have an understanding of knowledge that they might need in a given situation. And I think that, things that schools have used for a long time, like debate, really do a great job of emphasizing that skill. Because if you're in a debate, you can't say, hold on and check your phone. Right? It still highlights the importance of having a really thorough understanding of a topic if you're going to have an opinion on it. And I think that one of the biggest ways that AI and technology overall has kind of reduced the seeming need for us to have a full understanding of something before we have an opinion on it. So, to use your example, I think that's a great place to understand that this is pulling students and people away from things that maybe were not as obvious to them, like that having like just like a really strong base understanding of something, especially if you're going to talk about it. And so I think that that's certainly something that you can teach in schools, because you can have a debate and that will certainly highlight the need, to have a baseline understanding of a given topic. You can also emphasize the need to maybe prioritize certain skills, the skill to be able to, check facts in a really good way or important way, the skill to be able to cite information in an important way. Because if you put something out there, and you get in trouble for it, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I didn't say that, someone else, like, that I actually got it from here, but you don't have that cited, like, you don't really have many, like, two strong legs to stand on. So I think that, yeah, there's, I think, just like a need to understand what this landscape is now, how students are interacting with it, and then the skills that are needed to be able to, navigate their spaces, like we always say, in healthy and high character ways. So it's certainly creating not a lot of new challenges, but those are challenges. Educators are not new to challenge. It's just the challenges that we're talking about now look and feel a little bit different, and there's a need for educators to catch up a lot of the times when it comes to new and emerging technologies.
Yeah, and like what I hear you saying, like I know you guys aren't advising a specific, methodology for schools because there's, so many philosophies and methodologies that schools
Mhm.
adopt, to govern their curriculums and things like that. But what really I've been feeling is there's more AI, as innovative and as great as it is, it actually puts a greater need on the basics more than ever before. That the things that schools have been trying to produce in kids for generations now, those core abilities. So yeah, that's kind of what I've as everything's taking off, and it almost is
Mhm.
driving us educators further and further back to the just the
Mhm.
age-old things that teachers have done with students forever to develop their intellect, to develop critical thinking. Just thinking, like, I know you're not like talking
Mhm.
about specific types of education, but like classical education, where it's that rhetoric and those conversations where you have to, be able to articulate, think for yourself, and those kinds of things. We're not a classical educational school, in name, but at the same time, just some of harnessing some of those just timeless, you know, teaching skills and learning modes.
I was going to ask, does that mean you're bringing back cursive? Back on those fundamental
That's
skills?
so funny you bring that up. Like literally, we had this conversation a couple weeks ago. Um,
I'm
and
all
really,
for it.
yeah, and I just, and this is just, kind of give my parents a little insight into like, I just really need to know the why. You know what I mean? I'm not against anything,
Yeah.
but if we're going to hold on to teaching cursive in third grade, which we've done
Yeah.
for decades and decades, we're just in an age now where you really have to articulate why that is an essential use of student time. You know, so so
Yeah.
that's the role I play on my staff is
Yeah.
you know, I'm not against anything, but I'm always like, well, okay, if we're gonna keep this in, why? You have to tell me because
Yeah.
I'm gonna have parents telling me like, what's the point? I haven't used cursive in 40 years or whatever. So, anyways, that's funny you bring that up
Oh,
because
I love that. And I love that you brought up the why too, because I think that is important with everything, right? That's important with teaching kids, asking kids something to do something, asking students to use or not use AI. Like if you tell them to not do something, that's a pretty straightforward way to pique their interest into doing it. But if you tell them, hey, here's why I want to give you some skills, then all of a sudden it becomes a very different conversation. So I love that you brought that up too.
yeah, and just I feel an urgency to really take advantage of those elementary years. I feel like they're so because it's that time in development where they don't necessarily need to know all the whys. They
Mhm.
just know that the adult that cares for me and is here for me wants me to do this, so I'm going to do this. It's that beautiful time in development, that by the time so we know like you get seventh graders, eighth graders, then you have to motivate them with the whys, but there's this beautiful moment in time where the kids, you know, generally speaking, will just do because you asked, so really harnessing that. And I want to talk about cursive with my staff. Okay.
Mm.
Like, because we're third grade, it's like this prime time. Like, and if cursive needs to be there because they'll just do it, they'll just learn how to do it. But we
Yep.
as adults have to make sure that that is a great use of that instructional time. So, anyways, I can go on. What um and again, if this isn't necessarily your area of expertise, but what skills are you seeing are the most translatable in an AI driven
Mm.
world,
Yeah.
for kids that are going to be graduating high school from this point on, what are the most transferable skills that you guys are seeing are going to be essential?
Yeah. Outside of AI specifically, I think just this idea of like navigating a world where AI is integrated and exists, like critical thinking and discernment are going to be, the most important skill, especially when you're interacting directly with AI when it comes to, understanding AI outputs, verifying information, deciding whether something is a reliable source, and just thinking about, am I using this as a tool? Am I using this as a resource? Am I using this, at kind of beyond that line, if you will? I think tied in with that, married with that, is this idea of like creativity and adaptability, and
Mm,
problem solving. I think that, you know, AI can certainly it can answer a question for you. It's not going to solve problems for you. I think, the world will continue to exist. It does this great job of like automating routine tasks, right? It's sort of like you talked about, like you discovered sort of how much time AI can save you, and AI, I think for us who are using it, there's a way that like most people are using AI because we're not on like the development side of it where we're like super super entwined, and a lot of that comes down to like saving time and automating routine tasks and things like that. So understanding, I think, how to do that again, while also asking those questions about, how am I using this right now is going to be important and a skill because that's how most people I think are using AI. And then also, potentially thinking about it in this way that, I guess, in this way that understanding that AI amplifies everything. And it does this in a positive way, and it can also do it in a harmful way. And I use that example that we talked about earlier of, you know, AI can amplify your ability to automate routine tasks, like we just said. It can also amplify things that are harmful when you do start to lean on it as a companion and you're asking it not to, summarize a list of text, but you're asking it, hey, how should I navigate this relationship? How should I answer this question? And I think that it's important, again, to go back to that critical thinking piece, of understanding what it is. And that's really kind of on the student side. I think for educators, there's a really important, just baseline AI literacy that's going to be kind of common, that is going to be more integrated into, the set of skills that educators need. I think ethical leadership this is a great sort of philosophical time to think about, how we're going to talk about this and what does this mean for our school ethically and philosophically. And then I think instructional design is going to be, affected by it. And again, to use that metaphor that I used at the very beginning, like some people are, when we think about instructional design, some people are building irrigation systems and bridges, and they really want this integrated into the way that they teach. And some people are on, the banks saying that like, no, this is something that's dangerous and it's not going to be incorporated. So that's going to look very different from school to school. But I think ultimately there is a set of skills that will be necessary to navigate it, to teach it, and then to develop things like policies around it as well.
No, I mean, that's what I've been sensing. It's interesting. The skills are like discernment, critical thinking. Well, I love, saying creativity, because it's really going to be the person that can creatively get the most out of AI.
Yeah,
That's
it's
really going to have a leg up on the competition nowadays.
there's like a skill set in like AI prompts, right? Like writing the
Mhm.
right prompt into AI is a skill set. So you talk about like what skills might be necessary. So when you think about things like creativity, there's a whole set of skills that go into being able to use it as well as possible. And I think that, yeah, that made me think of that example for sure.
And problem solving, I have to plug just because we've kind of launched this at our school. Our guiding question for our school is now not what do you want to be when you grow up, but what problem is God calling you to solve?
Love
As a
that.
Christian institution, that's really how we want to frame all of our education now, as opposed to when I was growing up. Every year, I was asked, "What did I want to be?"
Yeah,
And that changed every single year. And I'm still not entirely sure as a head of a school
yep.
if I'm where I want to be when I grow up. But
I still haven't ruled out astronaut.
yes, yes, I'm still there's still like professional basketball players still, maybe someday. Um, but but yeah, I mean, it's really no, I had to jump on that framing.
I love that. No, I love that reframing of that question. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then those skills though that you're mentioning, like that's one of the challenges for us as we're trying to develop a curriculum. In our experience, like discernment, and those were byproducts. Those were kind of quote unquote soft skills
Mhm.
that came as you learned other hard skills. You know what I mean? And this is what I've shared with our community. The soft skills of the old are now the new hard skills, where we need to intentionally put discernment into our curriculum. Where that was something you didn't have a lesson, you didn't have a textbook for that. It was just something that came as a byproduct of life, and it'll still come that way. You know what I mean? But um, nowadays we have to make sure kids don't go through 13 years of education and potentially miss it as they're using an artificial source of discernment. So
Absolutely.
that's just for us. That's hasn't been the easiest shift, because those hard skills of old are much easier to frame lessons around. Like what's an objectively measurable lesson that can develop discernment. You know what I mean? That's a
Mhm.
bigger challenge,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's awesome.
well, good. Anything
No,
left on your mind?
I want to just say thanks. I love that you're having conversations about this with your families. I think it's so important to approach anything with conversation and with a set of questions. And I think it's just tremendous that you're having this conversation and you're bringing these questions to your families. I think that's wonderful. So thank you, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you for the time. Thank you guys for what you're doing. It is helping. I know, schools like ours are getting needed help and resources, and I'll link some of your guys' stuff in in this episode and in our newsletter when we publish it and everything. So
Yeah, and I'll send over some resources that you can share with your families too that might be helpful for them to check out.
perfect. Thank you so much, Allie. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Um, Enjoy DC. It's 95 degrees here in
Oh,
the
I would
desert.
trade it in a heartbeat right now. I really would.
Yes. I know you guys are getting hammered right now. So
Just so much cold, so much cold. Well, yeah, no, thank you. Enjoy the warmth, enjoy the sunshine, get a little bit of color from me. Mine is waning away. Um, but yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, and I'll send over some resources for you to share with your families. That'll be great.
okay. Thank you, Alli Lipsher of the Social Institute. Appreciate your time.
Take care.